welcome to episode 44 of the Free Spirit Academy podcast with leadership and business coach Ali Canales. Free Spirit Academy is about you being fully you. My name is Randy Moss, and I'm an eating psychology coach and Kundalini yoga teacher, bringing you conversations about freedom. Largely from rigid diets and painful body image, but ultimately it's about the freedom to be yourself. This is about honoring our own bodies and our purest self-expression. Welcome to the podcast. So before Free Spirit Academy was Free Spirit Academy, I was scooching around the internet trying to figure out how to transition from food blogging, which I had done not brilliantly, but I had a good time doing it, as a hobby, to eating psychology coaching as a job. And I'm pretty much 100% certain that if I hadn't worked with a coach at the time, I would have struggled a lot longer than I did to create what I wanted to create. Coaching and mentorship is so important in certain phases. And I recently fell in love with Ali's work, and I wanted to bring her on because she's not only a business coach, she has a background in ayurveda and using sensual, feminine embodiment practices to connect us to our bodies so that our bodies can be guides for us as we navigate our life and, of course, our business if we happen to have one. But before we dive into the topics today, I wanted to share something new that I'm offering. I have a few different options for working one-on-one personally with me. If you're struggling with emotional eating, binge eating, food and body obsession, generally not feeling free in your body, I work one-on-one through Skype in single sessions or month-long packages. And last month, I added a digital coaching option. So I'm using the app WhatsApp as a text support system. So all of my one-on-one clients have this available to them, and I'm offering it also as a standalone option. So my clients have been able to message me when they're in a sticky moment and they have an urge to binge, or they're struggling with what they're seeing in the mirror that day, or something emotionally intense is coming up and they want help working through it. I have links for more information in the show notes, so please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And now here are some of the things that you can look forward to in this conversation. So Ali and I talk about our unconventional takes on the body positive perspective and what we feel are some of the missing pieces. We talk about learning to love our bodies from the inside out rather than starting on the outside and trying to force it. How to address the shame that comes up when we're learning to care for our bodies and explore pleasure. What to do when you don't know what feels good in your body, or even just what foods would feel good to eat. We'll talk tools for connecting with your body, creating a sense of safety around making mistakes, emotions not being bad or negative, just messengers that are sometimes painful. And we explore the way our emotions naturally fluctuate and how each part of our female cycle has a different kind of medicine. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Ali Canales. So my take on the phrase body positive is simply that everything our body does, like every symptom, every reaction or sensation it has, is positive. And I've heard you talk about body positivity with a focus on sensuality and on pleasure. And for somebody who's used to maybe the traditional outside-in take on that term, how do you describe it from a more inside-out perspective, the importance of sensuality and pleasure?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because I started off with, I guess, what more of the traditional view of what body positivity was. And that came from my own experience of feeling very severely disconnected from my body with an eating disorder. And then also just having multiple sexual abuse traumas that happened in my life. And I focused primarily on that traditional, I guess, view of loving my body, but it did help immensely, but I always felt like there was something missing. And it really what came from this place of feeling like there was a lot of shame for what my internal body could do, shame for having an orgasm, shame for loving my breasts or shame for like being turned on. And I realized that there was still this one piece in this, I guess, journey to love my body that was missing. And that really came from like this sensual, sexual liberation, which really is, I feel like, this deepening of like being really like in love with not only like the outside of your body, like, yes, so important, but actually like reverse engineering and letting that loving energy come from the inside. And it came from this like curiosity of like, well, what would happen if like I went beyond shame of like having an orgasm or like feeling pleasure in my body, and like how would that allow me to experience more like positivity in my body and more liberation for just like loving myself. So I guess that's where it came from. And then I really feel like either way that you approach it, I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong, but there is such a deepening when we like look at our bodies from the inside out, especially as women. Like we have, I can only speak from my experience of being a woman, and this can go for women that identify as just, women as well. Is that there's such an immense power of like what our bodies can do. Like we can produce babies. Like I think in our, like, even if you think about it, like our orgasm, like the clitoris has like 10,000 more nerve endings than like a man's like penis. And it's very interesting it was just very interesting to see that there was so much shame there. I'm like, if I'm really going to go all in on loving my body and like loving myself, this really has to like, there can't be an inch of shame. Like there can't be an inch of, like downplaying what my body can do. So I really think that like this approach comes from like full acceptance and like full embodiment, and like really worship. Because I think it comes from like what I was desiring was to worship my body like a lover. Like I was like, what would it mean to be my own lover? Like what would it mean to really truly love this vessel and love every inch of this skin? And how can I allow myself to receive that pleasure? And by doing that internal work of like allowing my body to feel pleasure and like as a form of body positivity, like it was insane results. Like I was really working with this energy of pleasure and the sensual liberation. And it was like, I was able to look in the mirror like within days, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm so sexy, or like I'm so beautiful. And it was such a amazing journey. I'm like, wow, this shit is powerful. So that's when I kind of knew I was like onto something, or I was like, this is an interesting approach. Hopefully that answers your question.
So beautifully. And I think it's such like you said, everybody's journey is different, but it's such a missing piece for so many people. And the shame, I think, is what we're more just used to. We're more conditioned towards, most women, we're conditioned towards feeling shame. And I see it even transfer over into women getting into body positivity, and they want to love their bodies because they know they're going to feel so much more free when they love their body and they aren't trying to manipulate it from the outside in, but they look in the mirror and they're like, okay, I love my body. I love my body. I love my thighs. I love my belly. And I don't believe myself. And I think we need this inside out. Like once you feel how alive and, that connection with your sensuality, how incredible your body can feel, everything about the way that you feel sort of like it rises. I always say you look as good as you feel. Like,
I love that.
And you look in the mirror and you're like, oh man, I look pretty good today. You wake up feeling terrible and shitty and your head's all over the place, and you look in the mirror and you're like, I look terrible. And you probably look the same way you did yesterday. But to be able to connect with our senses, with our body, with the incredible sensation that we're capable of, I do not think it is talked about enough.
No, yes, there's so many points to what you said that I agree with, because like we were talking about, like any approach is your own journey and there's not like a wrong way, but I feel like this is such a missing piece in this body positivity movement, because for my own experience and when discussing this with my friends after, or like even when I was not into business coaching and leadership coaching, I was doing more work around this specifically with clients even. And it was like, a whole different level, because I really believe, and it sounds like you do too, is like, it's really energy first, like energetic alignment. And like you said, like that can translate into like physical reality. And you can, I believe, like, starting off with the physical, like I started off with really like looking in the mirror and like telling myself, like almost like faking it till I make it. And it did work, but there was like, it was next level when I was like really, it is that energetic embodiment of like, what would it mean to actually like embody this woman, this pleasure, this like adoration, this worship for myself. And then it was like, no matter if I was like in sweatpants all day and like maybe I gained 5 pounds, like I'm still like whatever it may be, like that used to trigger me, and I was doing like this internal work, I wouldn't necessarily have to try so hard to like, with the self-love and the body positivity, it came really not not easy, but like more easeful, like more it wasn't as forced. Like it wasn't like I was trying to convince myself. It was more like I was downloading this and like, oh, this is my new reality and how I show up.
Yeah, I like the way that you say that. I think it's similar to, I usually try and say it like we're doing hard things with ease, coming from a different place. Not that it's easy and not that we don't put in effort, but there's this layer of ease that's possible. And I want to talk more about the business stuff. And I know this isn't so much your focus right now, but like having seen how much work that you've done with your clients in the past, I feel like for people looking for support in business and online entrepreneurship, being able to go to somebody like you that understands this, I think is going to be very, very soothing for some people who don't even know that that's a possibility. I'm very excited. Like I want people to know that this is where you're coming from. I'm curious, just from your own particular journey, was there any, as you're getting into the pleasure piece and as you're embracing sensuality, I'm sure that it wasn't just something that you stepped into and you're like, oh man, where has this been my whole life? Like, was there shame that came up? Was there any feeling of like, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to give myself this time, this space, this energy, this amount of feeling good?
Oh my God. So many times. Like it wasn't like, cause now I can talk about it so openly. Like I can be like the clitoris and pleasure and like orgasms. Whereas like, when I was a teenager, I literally like my friends would be talking about masturbation and I would like sit, like I'd go home and I would cry, like, because I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed. And I had never like, I was in my like early 20s, like, or like maybe late teens when I like first started exploring my body and like was going through this opening. And it's just funny, like it was such a polar opposite. But when I first started coming into this work, there was, first it started as the intention. Like I knew that this was the work that I wanted to lean into. And there was immense shame. There was, especially coming from a background of multiple sexual abuse, and like it was challenging because what I had wired in my brain, the limiting pattern that was in my brain from those traumas was like, pleasure isn't for me, it's for men. It's for others to take from me. And I could think it was so hard to witness that. And I think it was such a big breakthrough for me to realize that that's where I operated from. Because like I talk about a lot in a lot of my work, it's like pleasure isn't just like orgasm, like pleasure is like life. It's like how a strawberry feels like. And when I realized that, I was like, wow, pleasure isn't for me. Like I can't enjoy my life, or like I can't enjoy being in my body. It's for others. And like, it was kind of like a wake up call, and it was like small inches, right? Like now I can like, these self-pleasure practices or these embodiment practices, they don't necessarily aren't as frightening. But at first I took it really slowly, like, and it was like the smallest thing, like in pleasure from the concept of what, like, enjoyment or like joy or like what makes me feel good. So if pleasure is a concept that kind of scares people, especially if they come from shame, I just start with the concept of like, what makes my body feel good, especially, right? Like what makes me feel good? Like And that was what I started with, is like, I don't want to buy this like cheap $5 t-shirt. Like I want the $50 like hand embroidered, like I feel so sexy, like sexy shirt. Or like I don't want the discounted fruit. Like I want strawberries right now. Or like even when I'm out to eat, I'm like, I don't want the salad because that's what I'm supposed to have. I really want the like mac and cheese lobster like burger because that's what my body like really wants, and that it's going to bring me so much pleasure. Like I think approaching it even from like life and then those baby steps, and we can talk about that more, like how that kind of translated more into like the sensuality and sexuality stuff. But I think that's a good starting place. Like what makes me feel good? Like what makes me turned on? Not necessarily like, ooh, I'm going to orgasm, but like what makes me turned on by life? Like what gets my body just like activated and feeling alive?
Yes, I think that's a perfect simplification of something that I think is too overcomplicated, because I mean this happens in mindful eating too. People think that, oh, mindful eating needs to be this like, I'm eating a mango in the bathtub and we're doing it and I'm touching my skin, and sure, like that sounds lovely, but if that does not connect with you at all, it really is just that question of what would feel good. Like body, what would feel good? What sounds nice? Because we don't even go there with ourselves. And I say we as sort of a general,
Totally.
the female population. And I thought it was so powerful. Like it hit me in the gut when you said like, oh no, pleasure to me, like pleasure was for men. That's not for me. And to have an awakening that like, oh no, that's for me. Like this is my body. And then being able to take that out, because as you're connecting with what feels good here, what feels good here, what feels good here, then you're able to take that into your business and be like, okay, what actually feels good to express? What is aligned with me to express? Or, you know, and that's at your plate. And that's when you show up in your closet in the morning and you ask yourself, what feels good to wear today? It's such a simple but profound question.
No, yeah. And I think that it was such a powerful question for me, because I was like, like I'm living my life for others, or like and pleasure, like, you know, that aliveness. I'm like, wow, like I'm giving my power away. And I think, you know, especially like the women listening to this podcast, whoever is listening to this podcast, are like gravitated towards your work. Like your work is very much about like lifting women up and in that empowerment stance. And like, really, that's what it's about. It's about like rising into your power and like owning that you are worth feeling pleasure. You are worth like celebrating your body and like not letting others, no matter what, if it's a man or society or like your grandma or like whoever it is, like dictate how you feel about yourself. Like I think that's what it really is about. It's like coming back to source and coming and operating from this place of, yeah, what feels good, like coming back to body wisdom, intuition, like heart, soul, like, you know, letting that guide the way. And it is like you said, like I really am glad of the journey I've taken of just like kind of doing lots of different things with clients and having different businesses and different, I guess, ways that I've impacted people, because now it is a different approach to business coaching. Like, yes, there's strategy and it's all great, but really I think the foundation of that work is like building a business that is super aligned and super yummy and like, yeah, what feels good? Like that's so important. Like what feels juicy, what makes you feel turned on. And I really feel like how we feel, like how we do like one area in life is how we kind of do all areas in life. So it all connects, like it's all intertwined and interconnected like a little spider web.
So for somebody who doesn't know what feels good, maybe they haven't been connected with their bodies at all, especially in a pleasurable way, what are some of the practices that you used or that you've given to clients in the past that get them starting to feel their body or starting to allow for more pleasure in their bodies?
Yes. Well, this is such a funny question, because whenever I think back to like when I was like in my severe eating disorder stages, which was like extreme, like non-eating and then binging and then like bulimia, like when I kind of started to come out of that, like it had gone so long where I operated from like food rules and like crazy, like just starving myself, where I was like, I don't even know what I like to eat anymore. Like, and that was kind of crazy. And that was like a very minor thing. And I was like, well, I don't even know what I like to eat. Like, I don't actually, I'm not even aware of like what my body's trying to communicate with me. And this is something that my clients were like, a lot of the times, I'm trying to think. I just had a client finish up with me. And when she first came to me, like I always usually get them to start off with this, like retuning into the body. And it was funny because she was like, I don't even know, like, yeah, like we were talking about, like what makes me feel good. And I think the first thing that I got her to do was first, I think meditation, like I know people say this all the time and people are so tired of hearing it, but I think that it's such a great way to tune into the body because you're silencing or like the aim, not like I think people are scared of meditation because they think their brain has to be totally silent. My meditations are very active where like now they're more channelings or downloads of like what makes my body feel good or like directions I'm supposed to take, right? So I think meditation is a great way to start because you're silencing the outside noise and getting closer to that soul voice. And I think, yeah, I know people are like, oh, not this tip again, but I really think it does work. And when there's a committed practice, it's so, so helpful. And I think people get scared because it's like, I can't meditate for like 30 minutes. Like just do 5, like just baby steps. Like instead of like quitting before you even start, like just lean in and like, okay, yeah, you open your eyes like maybe 4 or 5 times in your 5-minute meditation. Like, who cares? You're showing up, and that's what it's about, like showing up. I think the next, sorry, go on.
Before you go on to the next thing, do you do like a breath-based meditation, or like where does the focus lie when you are presenting meditation to somebody for the first time?
What I focused on when I first started was definitely breath-based, and that's what I usually give my clients is breath-based because it's really easy. Breath is really easy to tune in, and like I feel like especially for people that are starting, something to focus on that's in their body again. And breath is one of those constant things. Like you can even use it when you're having like a challenging moment just with your body, like connect to the breath, connect back to source. So usually more breath-based. And that's what I started with. And then once you're kind of like, not when you're more evolved, but once you kind of have more practice, a lot of my clients shift into kind of what I do now, just personally, is like when I meditate, it's more of like a download of checking into like higher self of like, oh, how do you want to show up today? Or like, what would feel good today? Yeah, I think definitely breath-based just because it's such an anchor, like it's that real anchoring back in. And for anyone that does like, because I get a lot of clients that have a hard time with breathing practices because it's so present, right? And they're so not used to being that present in their bodies. Like, again, like it doesn't have to be perfect. Just allow it to be what it's going to be. Like, I don't think no one's a perfect meditator the first time they meditate. And like the first time, like, you know, someone tries to run a marathon, like they're not going to do it perfectly. It really takes practice. It takes showing up again and again and again.
Absolutely. Which I think is advice for everything. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just keep showing up.
Yes, 100%. And the next thing, like just to keep it, I guess, small, I think journaling is a really powerful practice because there's something really powerful when like you're asking yourself powerful questions, you get really transformative answers. So what I usually get my clients to do, part of their like little morning routine, is like just simply ask, like, you know, what does the body need to feel supported? What does the mind feel like need to feel supported? What does spirit need to feel supported? What would heart need to feel supported? And maybe like at first this might be a couple of forced answers, and that's okay because you're practicing using that muscle of intuition, muscle of body wisdom, right? So, you know, I think it can, like, you might be looking at it for 5 minutes like, well, I don't know what my body needs. But like, you really, I think people do know. It's that they doubt themselves. Like,
That's what I was going to say. Usually an answer will come. It's just, you don't know that you can trust that.
Yes, that's what it more is. It's more about trusting yourself and not doubting your wisdom. And that's a result of being disconnected from our bodies. Because if you notice, there's a difference from people that are very connected to their bodies. They also trust themselves a lot more. They're more likely to show up in the world, like in a different way, like take risks or like ask the guy out on a date or whatever it is, because I think it's more of that trust for themselves. And it's more of like, I'm showing up, like, even if it's taking right or wrong wrong out of it and just allowing yourself to play and be curious.
I mean, that's
So
it, because the head goes right and wrong, which is great and very, very useful. But like, if you don't have the body, where's your guide? Where's your guide for what feels good? Where's your guide for intuition? So of course.
Totally. Yeah. Because the mind is really like, it is needed for some things like right or wrong, but like, especially when we're doing this kind of work, it's like, well, is it right to go for a walk today? Is that what body really wants? Be curious. Like, how are you going to know if you don't test it out and play around? Like, approaching it from this very playful, innocent, like, I'm just going to test this out, right? And then it kind of brings you to that point where you're like a young child again. That's not like crazily thinking about your body. It's just about playing. And that's also a part of pleasure.
It so is. And then the body is curious too. I think people get, because I do a lot of intuitive eating work with people, and they'll be like, well, I ate what I thought I wanted and then I felt terrible. And I'm like, we have to play. Like, the body's curious. Let's try this. If it feels terrible, that was part of your play. Like, play some more, find out.
Oh my God, I love that you do that with people because it's such an experiment and it's kind of bringing on that curiosity cap, right? Of like being a scientist and like researching what works and what doesn't work. And you know what? It's like, okay, like take, because I think it's about being a failure. Like, oh, I'm going to fail this, or like, I'm going to get it wrong. And that's really instilled in us,
so afraid
right?
of being wrong.
Yes, so afraid of being wrong, especially as women, because I think where it's like bad girl and good girl. Like you can't be good if you fail. Like just this diversity, and it's like, well, your whole self-expression, your whole full embodiment of your like fierce feminine essence. She doesn't really care about being wrong or good. She's just herself, and that's going to encompass making, in quotes, like a mistake. Like it's just, she's going to give herself the space and grace to just give herself full permission to do what she wants and experiment what feels good. Because quite honestly, what feels good today might not feel good tomorrow. And that's why it's playing around.
Yes. Yeah. And as we're talking about playing and feeling and being wrong, like the fear of being wrong, I think another thing that we can make ourselves wrong for is negative emotions. And I heard you talk about how you don't feel there is such a thing as negative emotions. And I would agree. I would say maybe painful emotions. But you went on to talk about how we can suppress with alcohol, and maybe you talked about food. I don't know. I talk a lot about food. But how do you work with women on not making themselves wrong for having a painful emotion, and then how to work with those emotions without seeing the emotion as negative or them as negative?
Oh my God. I love this topic. It's like, it's one of my favorite things because it has been so powerful for me to just change my relationship with, I guess, emotions in general. Because like you, like, I think there's definitely more, painful emotions like shame. Like shame doesn't feel great to feel, but I wouldn't, I think every emotion, like I'm going to talk primarily about the emotions that I felt in my life that in quotes, I think people deem as negative. Like shame would be one of them. Sadness would be one of them. Fear would be one of them. A lot of those come from my sexual abuse. And what I had to learn to heal through them was like re-looking at the relationship to them. Like, well, if I was an innocent child and I was feeling sad, would I have the thought process, or would I have the intelligence, or like, would I even think that this, like, categorize it as negative? Yeah. Like, let's not even go into like the language of like bad and good. Again, it's like, yeah, the sensations of sadness might feel like a little bit heavier in my body, but it's not necessarily like bad. So where did I learn that being sad was bad? And then it's looking, I'm like, well, it's a possibility. Like there's an experience where I was called a crybaby, and then like I was made fun of, and that turned into something painful, and I associated that with being sad. Like I think it's looking at, first of all, where we have that relationship with that emotion started and why we think it's negative in the first place. Because what I truly feel, and I can say this with all certainty and all of the trauma that I have went, I'm so grateful for all of those, in quotes, like negative emotions, or like, let's just call it for what it is, more painful emotions, because they've given me the opportunity to deepen my healing. I think they're just opportunities for growth. And it's really about shifting your mindset and perspective, because you can sit over here and be like, you know, the sadness that I feel over, you know, for me, it was my sexual trauma. Like, you know, I'm so like honoring the sadness, like, yes, that call, like, that's what I'm feeling, but going more into the sensations in my body, and also just like honoring for what it is, but not making that like the story of who I am. Like, I'm a sad person, like I'm a shameful person. Because as soon as we identify as like, this is who I am, we make it a part of who we are, instead of being like, I am a human being that has sadness. And I will be the first to say, I don't always use that language. Like, I slip up and I'm human, but I like to look at it from that perspective of like, I'm not necessarily like I'm not fearful. Like, I have fear, or like, I'm not sad. Like, there's sadness within me. Like, because who we truly are is just like, our like inner essence is like, it doesn't, I think it's not even about necessarily like emotions. Like, I think emotions in that language is like, so beyond who we truly are. So I think the first step in like really sitting with them is like witnessing it and honoring it. Because it's not about like bypassing it and being like slapping some like spiritual bypass on it and be like, but I'm happy, like I have to be joyful. It's like honoring and witnessing, and then also allowing yourself the space and grace to feel. Like, if you got to cry, like cry, girl, like it's all good. And I think the next thing is like mindset, like trying to, which is like harder said than done. But again, it's like a practice and a pattern that you have to learn to move into and lean into, of, I guess, trying to rewrite the story. Like, it's really about rewriting the story of like, what's the lesson presented here? Like, okay, I'm so sad because my boyfriend cheated on me. Yes, you're sad you're sad about it, but what is this emotion trying to teach to me, or what is the situation trying to teach to me? And it's usually like an opportunity for growth. So I hope that makes sense, because there's like a lot to dive into for there, but hopefully in a snapshot.
It's true. It's so hard to talk about emotions in 5 minutes, but you're so right. It's not seeing ourselves as sadness. It's being like, oh, sadness is a messenger. Like, hi friend, and like, what are the emotions, what are the sensations that come up in my body, and see that almost as separate too, not as a disassociative, like you said, the spiritual bypassing thing. Because I think too that people think very often that maybe when they're spiritual enough, or when they've advanced enough, or when they've done enough work, they won't feel sadness anymore, or they won't feel anger anymore, they won't feel these things. But no, if these things are not what's wrong with you, they're simply messengers, then they will continue to come, and that doesn't make you wrong. It just, we become more adept at gleaning the messages.
Yes. Oh my God. I love that you said like sadness is a messenger. Like, they're just like, because that's exactly what they are. They're messengers. And like the thought that I had around what you just said is, they're always going to come up. Like, I think I think so many people, I just hear them be like, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy in life, which is beautiful. But I'm like, you can't be happy 24/7. Like, that's not, it's kind of setting yourself up for like a false expectation. Like, yes, of course I want to be happy, like more generally in my life than I am sad. But then also, if like sadness comes up and you're trying to make yourself up to be this perfect human being that like is always happy, like, I think that causes the most suffering, because we're human beings and we're multifaceted. And like, I think it's more about how we respond to the emotions. And when we react to them, that's what we create the suffering, or the expectation that we're not meant to feel these emotions. Because if you think about it, that's a lot of energy to like suppress our emotions. Like, it's more energy, right? Right? Because if I am going to raise my hand and be like, I actually like, maybe not in the moment, like when I'm feeling sad, but when I have a good cry afterwards, I feel so good, especially when I'm intentional with it and I'm present with it. I'm like, wow, that feels good. And usually when I'm fully present with that emotion, and I'm like you said, like, hi friend, like not being like, go away, like I hate you, but like, hi friend, like, you know, I'm just going to honor you. And usually it speeds up the process, like, because I'm present with it and allowing that
sadness, those sensations to move through my body and actually integrate.
Right. And because everything is temporary, and if we don't allow them to integrate, the same thing is going to come up over and over again. And I think that particularly for women, we can't expect ourselves to get to this point, like, and not for men either, to be the same all the time, but particularly for women, because we're so fluctuating. And we have these cycles and these seasons. And I know that you talk a lot about syncing our lives and syncing our businesses, if we're business owners, with our personal cycles. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. Honestly, it was such a game changer when I learned, especially for women, like learning the medicine about your cycle. Because again, it's also about taking away shame. Like, how many women are ashamed that they bleed each month? Like, so many women, like, and it's also a bodily function, like something really powerful. And also that disconnect that's been created about not loving our cycles was not to get like all feminist, but was created by the patriarchy, like created by men of like, you know, I don't understand why women can bleed each month and like for like 4 days straight and they're not dying. Like, they must be witches. We have to burn them. Like, you know, so actually reclaiming your cycle is so powerful. Like, I really feel like it's so liberating to own, like, I'm a woman, and they're in those phases. We're so connected. We are so, like, women are so interconnected to nature, and those cycles, I think, are really great to understand because we have 4 cycles. So menstruation, our follicular phase, our ovulatory phase, and our luteal phase. There's a lot of information that can like go into each of them. I want to talk particularly like maybe about a couple. I just touched base on a few. So I think particularly the 2 that kind of get the worst rep are your like the stage right before you bleed, like your luteal phase, where like you're PMSing, right? And you're like a little, you know, I want to put in quotes, like a little bit more crazy. Also, like, it's an invitation to slow down, because as women, I think sometimes it really happened. I think kind of ironically in the feminist movement of being like, well, I want equal, like to be equal as men. And that kind of translated into trying to keep up with men by forgetting that like we also operate differently, and we're not energizer bunnies like 24/7. Like, we go through phases when our energy is a bit more low. And one of those phases is when we're PMSing. It's going like, I don't know about you, but I'm like, I usually hibernate a little bit more. I am a bit more cranky, and it's also a reminder to slow down. And I set up my life. So I'm like, okay, week before my cycle, like probably not going to go out with friends, probably going to communicate with my partner that I need a little bit extra love or like patience. And for myself, how can I best support myself? If I know that I'm feeling a little bit more on edge, what do I really need?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I want to interject, and I'm so sure that we agree on this, that it's not because this is a time of weakness. It's like you said, every phase has medicine. It's not because we are going crazy. But I think that like if there's anything that we're not looking at in life, like people are going off, I don't know your opinion on this.
Yeah.
Going off on plant medicine journeys. And I'm like, we have this fucking cycle. We don't need to go on plant medicine journeys because once a month, life shows us what isn't working, what is out of alignment. And if we listen to that, it's like, oh, here's what needs to shift. Here's where my perspective needs to come more into alignment with who I really am, with what truth is. Like, we don't need anything. Our bodies are incredible. Like this is something that's been in my mind because I just went through this part of my cycle, and I was like, I don't know what people are doing on these journeys because like my body makes me shoot all the time.
Oh my God. Yes. So much yes. No, like so much yes, because I was someone that was really big into plant medicine, particularly ayahuasca. And I was doing that for like years. And when I started really learning about my cycle, like exactly what you said, I'm like, I don't need anything externally.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. I've never done plant medicine, and I've always felt very like, I just don't know about that for me. Like, I don't think that's right for me. And I have all of these inklings of why that is. And so thank you for confirming that.
Yes, no worries. And I think obviously like it is so powerful in so many ways. And like, there was a time when I'm like, it was such a healing journey. But for me, as women, like, I'm like, I have everything I need inside my body. Like you said, we have a built-in cycle that allows us to release old emotions. That's why our menstrual cycle comes up. That's why we bleed, to not only let go of like the old blood and like, yes, all the scientific stuff, but actually when I'm in my PMS phase and I'm noticing my triggers, like, okay, you know, this, like, for example, like what was one that was really coming up this week or this month? Okay, so this like girl is talking to my boyfriend, like it's really triggering me. I know he loves me, but why is this a trigger? It's nothing about them. It's a trigger that I don't feel good enough, or, you know, leaning into that. So I also look at it as like what needs to be released. And when we bleed, it's actually time to, like you said, like reset and let go, and not only shed like, you know, all the scientific stuff, the old blood and like the uterine lining, but actually the emotions that are holding you back in life. And that's why it's like those cycles. Nature, like our bodies are so smart. They're way smarter than we think we are. We literally have a built-in cycle that allows us to go through this process of cleansing every single month. And like what I encourage women to really ask themselves, to really ponder, is like, what would happen if I really tuned in and started utilizing that medicine? Of course, like in life and in business, like it is so powerful, and there's always so much more to learn. Every cycle is different, and you know, it's really like this built-in like oracle. I mean, in every phase has its own little actually feminine archetype that you play with. Like it is, I would argue, one of the biggest I guess access to your feminine wisdom. Like so powerful.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I get really melty when the conversation goes in such a good direction. I'm like, oh my
I know. I'm like, yay, this is so
everything.
juicy. It's the best.
So let's get a little more towards business. I've been thinking a lot about self-love, as in like not trying to coax yourself into this feeling state, but first like treating yourself as if you were somebody who loved yourself, and having self-love spring from that, kind of like what we were talking about in the beginning with the body positivity. How do you connect that with business? So tell me about what you're doing right now, showing up fully in your business, like as if you were the woman who loved herself, even if you don't quite feel that yet, as if you were ready to present this message, even if you don't quite feel like you are yet.
Oh my God, this is like such perfect timing too, because it's like the day after Valentine's Day. Yeah. And I did a post yesterday all about why self-love should be the foundation of your business. And like funny enough, I'm creating this business coaching program that is in pre-enrollment right now, but going to be starting in April. And every module is a feminine archetype and works around the feminine archetype. And the first one is the lover, right? To love yourself. Like because what I always say to my clients, if we can't accept the wholeness of who we are, how can we let others and our clients experience the fullness of our medicine? And that really comes from love, right? If you are not, and like, it's so important to love yourself, because if you are at all like hiding yourself or like not letting people fully see you, like you're doing a disservice to your clients, because all those things that like make you who you are. Like, for example, if I hated the fact, because I cuss a lot, like I do. And it's just funny in my, like, even though like I'm really small and I love the color pink, but like it's just something I do. If like I hated that part of myself and I didn't love myself, I'd hold that part of myself back. And actually being yourself inside your business is the biggest client magnetic attractor strategy tool that you can use, because it's going to filter out, and like what you want in your business is to repel the people that are not meant to be a part of your tribe and attract the people that are like, fuck yes, woman, I love you. I love what you're about. And that's really comes from love. When we learn to fully love ourselves, it gives ourselves the permission to go all in on our visions, to create from a heart-centered place. And that's what we really want in businesses. And we're moving into this, what I'm calling the quantum leadership of level of success, where it's not about like the hardcore strategies. It's about creating businesses that create impact. And that's all from a place of love and giving ourselves the permission to do so. Because if, you know, we are trying, I think this really comes from this place of when we're trying everyone else's formula and we're like, oh, this is what we're supposed to be doing to be successful. Or like, you know, I need to implement this. Really, I think what I'm trying to articulate also going back to that wisdom of like, what would happen if you loved yourself enough to go all in on your vision? Like, what would that really look like? Because that's when we can change the world, when creations and businesses are come from a place of this full embodiment of who you are. And that all comes from love. That all comes from like owning who you are and not letting any inch of yourself not be touched by that love and by the space and the grace to just own your gifts and own what you're here to do and how you're here to serve.
Yes. And I think we have to say that if that sounds terrifying, that's okay. Like,
yes.
It is to admit that at first, like, oh my God, what if I did go all in? That would be really big, and holy shit, we'd be seen. And that can be very scary, which is why the self-love piece is needed. So it's okay if that sounds utterly terrifying, and we're all doing it. We're all doing it together. And I think we're so lucky to have people who have, gone a few steps ahead of us. And I definitely want to be, I want to share what you're offering. So this will be in the links for the show notes. If you're looking to create a business and this is the sort of mentorship that you're looking for, this is the direction that I would want to funnel people. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Was there anything, I felt like I cut you off a little bit. Was there anything else that you wanted to say on that topic?
No, I think you touched on a good point. Is like, it's okay to be afraid of it too. Like like we were talking about with those emotions, like honor the fear. Like when I talk about this stuff, like I'll be the first to admit, like there's fear that comes up for me. I'm like, wow, this is a powerful like charge to lead, but witnessing the fear and then doing it anyway. And that's how we break the pattern. And it's fully okay to be scared because it's normal and you're human. So that would be the only thing that I completely agree with. Like, it's okay. I did a live on it this morning, which probably won't be up, obviously, when you post the podcast, but I posted it in my Facebook group. And I was sharing that my favorite quote it's a poem by Marianne Williamson, or I think a speech. And it's like, our greatest fear is not our darkness, but our light, like really show up in a big way.
Yes. And I think there's like fuel in that. Like whenever I have this really intense fear and anxiety, like you were talking about earlier with the sensations in our bodies, if I really settle into it, it's just sensation in my body. And if I let it be and I really focus on it, and I'm like, again, like, hello friend, like what is in here? It becomes something more than what I thought it was in the beginning. And it's the same too, because I'm also, I act and I sing and I do stuff on stage, and I get like a lot of butterflies. But if I'm not like trying to shove them down, I'm like, okay, this is fuel. This is like my edge. This is what's going to give me that extra little magic if I don't make it wrong.
Yes. So much. Yes. Yes.
One last question. This is the Free Spirit Academy podcast. And my definition of a free spirit is you when you get to be yourself. And and that gets to evolve. That's not like a final thing. When you think of the term free spirit, what comes up for you?
Permission and unapologetic, and in relation to kind of what we were talking about before, like giving yourself the permission to explore and play and find what feels good for you, and being unapologetic about how that looks to other people, and just owning it, like owning that you are a unique creature and the way you show up in the world is going to completely be different from how others do. And that's perfectly okay. It doesn't mean you're wrong or right. It just makes you you, and you're allowed to fully embody who you are without that being wrong.
Yes. Thank you so much. This was so good.
I know. I'm like, oh my God, this was so juicy. So much like just like fluid conversation. I loved it.